All right, so this is our monthly new partner introduction. This came about because we'd get feedback talking to people and they'd be buying our switches, but not realize we also offered access points. They'd be buying our access points and not realize that we offered firewall security products, or just we're talking to new partners and we've got a lot of products that we offer and there was a lot of confusion. There's like 10 different lines of switches. What type of switch do I need? Things like that. So we've put this together today to sort of give you a high level overview of some of the different product offerings we offer here in the channel. We will not be talking about service provider products, products for ISPs. We're talking about our switches, access points, gateways, things like that. As we go through today, if you have any questions, use the question and answer section of the Zoom interface to send those questions in. Don't raise your hand, don't send them via chat. Use question and answer. I can see those and I will do my best to answer those as we go through today. So we'll start with just a little bit about who Zycel is. We realize we are not a household name. Most people, when you say, hey, I want to propose some Zycel equipment, a lot of them will come back to you and say, what? So who we are Zycel Networks. Zycel has been around now since 1989, so well over 30 years making computer networking equipment. We got our starting back in the day making stuff for dial-up ISPs, bulletin boards, things like that. And then we expanded off into ISDN, DSL, cable modems, computer networking stuff, firewalls, et cetera, et cetera. For instance, we've been doing Wi-Fi since back before 802.11 AB, back when it was just 802.11, we made Wi-Fi PCM CIA cards. So we've been doing this for a long time. There's over 100 million devices deployed out in the field. Now we are a international company. We work in over 150 different global markets. The United States is one of the smaller markets for us, which also goes back to that name recognition. We aren't as big here as we are in other places around the world. Now, if you were here, you probably recently joined our partner program. So just a quick highlight here, as part of the partner program, you are going to get automatic discounts when you buy through our distribution partners. We have 3 different tiers of discounts based on your sales level, bronze, silver, and gold, and that gets reevaluated twice a year. So as a partner, you have a salesperson that's dedicated to your team. You have the ability to do deal reg. So if you have a project coming through, reach out to our salesperson, let them know, do a deal reg. You'll get a little extra discount and it'll make sure no one else gets the discount for that project. We give you access to Marcus, our sales engineer. We give you a priority access to our tech support, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing here to highlight is we are based out of California. So that's where our main office is. That's where our tech support is. So if you call into tech support, you're calling into our office here in Southern California. And that is all Zycel employees. It is not an outsourced support team. It is all done in-house. And then for sales, we have 3 different salespeople dedicated to the channel. So based on what state you are determines who your salesperson is. Those of you on the western part of the United States, you are dealing with Andy. Those in the middle are dealing with Jacob. And then those on the East Coast are dealing with David. So when it comes to channel products, we've got a number of different solutions available for you, and we'll go through most of these today. Security appliances, wireless solutions, switches. We have some consumer products, although we aren't going to talk about those today, and most of those are sort of on their way out. And then various network management solutions, and we'll talk about a couple of those today. So we're going to get started by talking quickly about Nebula. So for those of you that are new, Nebula is Zycel's basically version of something similar to like a Meraki solution. The ability to set up and manage your Zycel networking equipment through the cloud, not needing to do any local configuration. So we'll quickly go through some of the key features of our Nebula platform. So it allows you to basically to simplify your setup, and it'll allow you to start doing configurations of your customer's network before you even receive the hardware itself. At any point, you can log into nebula.zycel.com, set up your new customer, start setting up whatever number of sites that you may need, and start doing some basic configuration. Once you've received the hardware, you simply scan the QR code on the outside of the box or on the belly label of the product and assign it to your customer's site. And that's basically all you need to do. From that point on, you can do the full configuration before you even take the hardware out of the box. Simply ship the hardware on site, plug it in, and as soon as it gets power and an internet connection, it'll reach out to the cloud, see that it's been purchased and assigned to a site, and it'll automatically update its firmware and download the configuration that's been defined for that site for you. So in order to use Nebula, you need really nothing. There's no software that needs to be installed anywhere. There's no servers you need to set up. There's no additional hardware like a cloud key that you may need. The agent is built into all of our Nebula compatible hardware itself, and it'll handle everything. There's nothing you need to configure on the devices themselves. You don't need to tell them or put them into cloud mode. They will do it automatically if you want to manage them through the cloud. And basically, one of the main benefits here is it makes it super easy for you to get remote access to your customer site. So basically, anywhere you have an internet connection and a web browser, you have access to all of your customers' networks. It's right there for you. You don't need to worry about, port forwarding rules, setting up VPN connections. Nebula takes care of all of this for you. All configuration is done over the air. There's never a need to go on site to do configuration or firmware updates or things like that. You do it all in the cloud and it'll get pushed out to the devices automatically. So Nebula was designed from the ground up, understanding that you're going to have lots of customers. They're going to have maybe multiple sites for each of these customers. So it was designed specifically to make it very easy for you to jump between customers and sites as you need to as you go. So Nebula itself is free. The core version of Nebula is free at the moment. It gives you gives you the ability to manage an unlimited number of customers, an unlimited number of sites, and an unlimited number of devices. All was part of the free version. We do have a couple of license options that you can purchase that will upgrade and add additional features, primarily aimed at those of you that are doing MSP type stuff. So it'll give you access to push alerts, branded email reports, additional troubleshooting tools, things like that for the most part. Most of our customers use the free version, and at any point, if you're using the paid version, you decide you don't need those extra features, you can always drop back to the free version. So if you're interested in the Nebula Cloud, what you want to look for is hardware that is called Nebula Flex. So when we first started out, we didn't offer Nebula Flex. We sort of went the Cisco Meraki route, where if you wanted traditional management, you purchased Cisco. If you wanted cloud management, you purchased Cisco Meraki. We have moved away from that now, and basically everything we sell now that's Nebula compatible is what we call Nebula Flex. And so what that means is it gives you the flexibility to choose whether you want to manage that equipment the traditional way or whether you want to manage it the cloud way. So they'll have either mode, and you can switch back and forth between cloud mode or the standalone mode based on your customer, or if you move the device from one customer to another customer site, you can switch the modes based on that. Some of our equipment you will see is flagged as Nebula Flex Pro. So for the most part, what Nebula Flex Pro means is it includes 1 year of our Pro Pack license bundled with that hardware. So both Nebula Flex, Nebula Flex Pro give you that flexibility of either doing a traditional management or cloud management. Pro just gives you that extra license, which unlocks some additional features. The one exception to this is the access points. So if you're looking at access points, Nebula Flex Pro adds a third mode, which is the ability to be managed by one of our local controllers. So if you're doing a large wireless deployment, you do not want to use cloud management, you want to use a local controller, you will want to buy our access points that are labeled Nebula Flex Pro. Those will also work with our controllers. So we'll move on here to our security products. These are our firewall UTM gateways. So UTM being Unified Threat Management, meaning that the gateways themselves provide additional security features like content filtering, antivirus, intrusion detection, etc. So again, coming back to, Zycel is not necessarily a household name when you're talking to some of your customers. So one thing you can present to them here is that our security firewall products now have been ICSA certified for 20 years in a row now. So ICSA Labs is an independent third party that provides testing and certification of security products. So they have tested and verified the quality of our firewall products here for us. Now, for most companies, when they provide these UTM services, they do it all in-house. So if you're looking at one of our competitors, they're providing the hardware, they're providing the software, they're also providing signature updates, meaning they also need to be a antivirus company, a content filtering company, etc. So at Zycel, we do it a little bit different. We make the hardware and the software, but we've partnered with some industry leaders when it comes to the those extra UTM features and the signatures that are being used. So depending on the hardware you're buying in the UTM bundle, you're getting services provided by McAfee, WebRoot, Lastline, Tread Micro, and Bitdefender. So rather than trying to do that all in-house, we've partnered with the best guys out there for you. So we'll just talk briefly about some of the general firewall features that you'll find in most of the products here. Just real quick, we do link aggregation grouping, where you can group different ports together to give you higher link availability. Also gives you a little bit better throughput. High availability pro, the ability to have two firewall gateways in place. One is your primary, and then if something happens to that primary, a secondary one can automatically take over until you fix your primary one. SSL packet inspection, the ability to apply our UTM services even to SSL encrypted traffic. We can integrate with your existing Radius or Active Directory to be able to create user-based policies. VPN high availability, the ability to do WAN load balancing, the ability to have multiple WAN ports. We have what's called a virtual tunnel interface to allow you to trunk different VPNs together. And then when it comes to remote access, we support an SSL VPN software. We support L2TP over IPsec, which is built into a lot of mobile devices. We have an easy VPN wizard that makes it really easy to set up site-to-site VPNs between different Zycel equipment. And of course, we're using the latest SHA-2 VPN security encryption functionality. Now, our security and firewall products, in addition to being just that, a firewall UTM product, also have the ability to act as a Wi-Fi controller. Most of our products will support eight APs out of the box, and then you can buy a license to unlock additional AP management. We also have hotspot management functionality here. So if you want to provide hotspot management features, if you want to use this as a in a small hotel or a coffee shop or something like that where you're providing public access, we have the ability to do the captive portal through the gateway here for you. Another cool feature here is the ability to do a virtual private cloud. So we are certified with both Amazon and Microsoft for our security appliances to essentially make a VPN tunnel directly into the cloud. So that way cloud hosted applications can be accessed by your local LAN users as if they were being hosted locally. So just to show you here on our firewall product lines, we've got right now two main categories here for our products. We have the USG Flex series and the ATP series. At some point here in the near future, the ATP series is being phased out, and the ATP functionality is going to become something that you can do on the USG Flex with a license. So later this year, this fall, hopefully here, we'll have some new higher powered USG Flex models, and at that point, we'll probably phase out the ATP series. So just to make you aware of that, we have these two series, but they're going to sort of merge into one series here slowly over the next few months. And we're already sort of in the process of doing that. But basically, both sets of hardware provide VPN functionality. They provide that virtual private cloud. They have the built-in wireless LAN controller. They provide content filtering, etc. If you need hotspot management is only on the Flex series. Both of them integrate with our SecuReporter software, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And both of them provide your traditional UTM type services. The ATP series, when it originally launched, that was the only way to be able to get sandboxing, IP reputation filter, and DNS reputation filter. Those features are, though, now available as an optional license on the USG Flex series. So we'll talk a little bit here about the sandboxing functionality because a lot of people still aren't that familiar with it. So it's called ATP, stood for Advanced Threat Protection. And basically the way you traditionally do UTM, including on our USG Flex series, is that you have these signatures that help identify good traffic and bad traffic. The problem you run into it with this traditional way of doing things is with the internet, right? There's always new types of traffic, new types of applications, new threats that are popping up. And it takes time when something new starts showing up on the internet for companies to be able to recognize what this new traffic is and determine if it's good or bad. And then they have to create a signature to identify it, and then your device has to download it. So because of that, there is a gap between new types of traffic, including threats, that may appear on the internet and when your device is able to recognize and categorize them. So that gives you this sort of gap here in the middle where you're getting traffic where your device doesn't know if it's good or bad. So sandboxing is something that's been put together here, this advanced threat protection that's designed to sort of solve that issue and dramatically reduce the amount of time between new types of traffic and when the your device is able to recognize them. And they do that by doing this thing called sandboxing. Basically, when your firewall sees traffic that it doesn't know what it is, it's able to capture it and then upload it to the cloud. And then the cloud, we use artificial intelligence and simulations to figure out, is this something good or is this something bad? And then once we do, we're able to then push out signatures to our to your device so it knows this is good, go ahead and allow that traffic through, or this is bad, don't allow that traffic through. And so in order to do this, we've partnered with a company here called Lastline. So they're providing that sandboxing and artificial intelligence to help us detect things. And so what it basically does is it turns our ATP series devices and now our USG Flex devices into sort of this like global network. So as soon as one device sees some sort of new type of traffic, it's able to send it up to the cloud. And as soon as the AI determines what it is, it can push out those signatures in essentially real time to everybody on the internet before that threat spreads. So when it does finally get to your geographic location, your device will know if it's good or bad and whether to allow or to block it. So another thing we have here is called SecuReporter. I mentioned it earlier. So this is a cloud-hosted platform that we offer that basically generates reports for your firewall devices, right? So you've got these firewall UTM devices. They're blocking traffic. They're allowing traffic. They're doing all this stuff. And it's really hard to understand, especially if you've got a lot of customers out there, to keep on top of it and understand what's going on, what they're doing. And for those of you that are offering UTM services, obviously one of the biggest challenges is every year having to go back to your customer and say, hey, you need to pay me. It's time to renew those UTM services that are protecting your network. And they'll say, well, why? My network's been operating fine. Why do I need to pay this extra money? And SecuReporter is a tool you can use to provide exactly that answer to them. Because what it does is it takes all the logs and everything that the firewall has been doing and generates easy to understand reports, complete with charts and other visualizations to make it easier to understand. So you can see exactly what's been going on. So it's going to show you the who, what, and when of what the firewall has been doing. What threats has it seen? Who on your network or where on your network was it targeted? When did it happen? Where did the attack come from, etc. So that's going to tell you those type of information. So you can go back to your customer and say, look, this is what it stopped from getting on your network. This is what it stopped from affecting your network. It blocked, this phishing threat. It blocked this this attack that was going to encrypt your networks and hold them hostage. It will do that for you. So Secu Extender, much like Nebula, is cloud hosted. You don't need to set anything up yourself. You simply go to our URL and all of your customers are right there on the same URL. So you can set it up. It gives you a central place to see these charts, see what's been going on your customers' networks, and it gives you the ability to generate reports and automatically send them out. So these reports can go to you so you can keep an eye on what's going on your customers' networks, but you can also set them up to send the reports to your customers so they can see that you're proactively, protecting their network. And you can add your own branding to those reports so they get, so when they open them up and take a look at them, they're being presented with your name and your face on there essentially. So that's it for SecuReporter. Now we'll move on and security, and we'll move on to our switches. So switches is one of those areas where it gets really complicated and confusing because we've got a lot of different switches out there. And I think that's true for a lot of vendors. There's just, from my point of view, a ridiculous variety of switches that are available for you at different price points. So when it comes to, trying to find the switch that you need, I'm going to spend some time here talking about our naming conventions. Because if you understand our naming conventions, you have the ability when you're looking at a price list or when you're at distribution searching for a switch to be able to tell sort of what features that switch has. So by knowing this, you can quickly sort of narrow down which switches you want to look at, even if you don't know the exact model number. So to start with, all of our switches have a prefix of generally 2 or 3 letters, and that's going to tell you what speed of switch you've got. So if it's an ES that the model number starts with, that's telling you all of the ports on this switch are 10100. If it starts with GS, that's telling you all of the ports on this switch support speeds up to 1 gigabit. If you see XS, that's telling you all of the ports on this switch are multi-gig, usually 10 gig. If you see XGS, that's telling you that this switch has both 1 gig ports and multi-gig ports. So generally, if you see like an XGS something something dash 24, it's telling you that there's probably 24 1 gig ports, and then there's probably 2 or 4 10 gig or multi-gig uplink ports coming out of the off of it as well. If you search around, there's also the MGS series switches. Those are switches that are designed for the telco ISP space, like Verizon or something like that. So you won't generally see them, but if you're searching around, you may come across this on some of the global sites that Zycel operates. Another thing you will see is that there is often a letter at the end of the model name. So if it has P or HP, that's telling you it's a PoE switch. P is the older standard, the 15.4 watt PoE. HP can be either 30 watt PoE or 60 watt PoE. I don't know why we didn't come up with a new letter for the 60 watt PoE, but both 30 and 60 share that HP. And then if you see F, that's telling you that every port on that switch is a fiber port. So if you're doing active fiber, you're looking for a fiber switch, look for a switch that ends in the letter F. So just to show you here, this is how we normally our switches look like here for you. And what you see here is generally you've got your main switches or your main ports are over here all grouped together. And then you'll have your uplink ports on the far right side here. So when you look at the model name, you will generally see something like GS, right? Or we'll say XGS. So we know there's both 10 and 1 gig ports. Then you'll see the series number. So 1920 or 1930 28 HP. So the dash is telling you how many ports are there, mostly. So generally the main ports are going to be, 8, 24, 48. And then if you have a higher number than that, that's normally describing how many uplink ports you have. It's not consistent, unfortunately. So some switches you'll have a dash 24 that actually has 28 ports, and sometimes you'll have a dash 28 that has 28 ports. It just depends on the model series and when it was produced originally, whether or not the uplink ports in, or put the uplink port count into the main model number. So not quite as clear as it could be always, but these ports here are going to be your uplink ports. Now we do have something here where if you'll notice on these ports, they actually have, for one port, you have 2 different interfaces. So on a lot of our switches, you will have this where you will have both a copper and an SFP option for the same port. So there's 2 physical interfaces for one actual port. So you can use either or. So that way you can mix and match your, Cat 5, Cat 6 cable with your fiber modules. So then just in general, an SFP port or an SFP module, which we sell, those will do speeds up to 1 gig. SFP Plus will do speeds up to 10 gig. So if we take a look here at our switches, we've got a lot of different series. So we've tried to group them together into 4 different categories for you. Basically, anything that's unmanaged is over here in effortless. So that's our 100 series, 1000 series, 1100 series, 1300 series. So that's telling you what the model names are, right? So if you see 1300-24, you know it's a 13 series. If you see 1100-16, it's an 1100 series. We've got some switches with some very basic web GUI configuration. We have the 1200 and 1900 series. So again, what's the difference between 1200 and 1900? Primary difference is as the model series goes up, the more features that are available there for you. So while both of these offer some a web GUI and some VLAN configuration, you're going to get a lot more options in the VLAN configuration on the 1900 series than you would on the 1200 series. Also, the 1200 series is entirely desktop switches, but the 1900 series is a mix of desktop and rack mount switches. And then jumping up here, we have our flexibility series that we call it. And these are our best selling access points. So these are like full layer 2 or layer 2 plus switches, web GUI, cloud management. And then on the high end here, we have our full layer 2 series switches, which have command line interfaces as well as web GUI. So that's our 2200 series, 2210, 2220, 3700, 3800, 4600, etc. If you're looking for Nebula Cloud Management, basically you stick with those 2 top series there for you. So for Nebula Management, we've got the Nebula Flex models, 1915, 1920, 1930. And then we've got the Nebula Flex Pro models, which are the 1350 series, the 2220 series, 3800 series. So I'm not going to go through all of the switches. We've sort of already hit here on the main differences, but we'll just touch briefly on some of our best-selling models here. So the 1920 series is probably our best-selling switch for those of you that do not need a command line interface. It's a full layer 2 web managed switch with Nebula Cloud support on it. We provide PoE Plus. This gives you models up to 48 ports, up to 375 watts PoE budget, and then generally, fiber uplink ports on them. Jumping up from there is the XGS and the XS 1930 series. So this is basically where you're getting up to 10 gig. So if you don't need 10 gig, the 1920 is what you're looking for. If you need 10 gig ports, the XGS or the 1930 series is what you're looking for. So the XGS gives you a bunch of 1 gig ports and then 10 gig uplinks, whereas the XS 1930 series, everything is multi-gig ports on them. And then our best-selling switch series here is the GS 2220 series. This is what a lot of you buy out there. So this is a full layer 2 plus, layer 3 light, however you want to brand them. Switches, cloud management, built-in web GUI, command line interface. For those of you guys that like that command line interface, 2220 series is what you're looking at. So we'll move on from there. I'm going to talk a little bit about how our PoE works because it is a little bit different from some of the other vendors out there. And basically, most of our switches offer what we call intelligent PoE or consumption mode. And basically, the way PoE is supposed to work according to the standard is that basically when you plug in a PoE compatible device to your PoE switch, your device identifies itself based on a category. It says, hey, I'm category 1 or I'm category 4. And that tells your switch how much power out of the PoE budget to allocate to that device. The problem that we run into is that there's not enough of these classes. So there's some big jumps in how much power gets allocated using those classes versus what's actually needed. So for instance, class 3, I believe, is 15.4 watts, but the next step above that, class 4, is 30 watts, right? So double the power budget utilization. And so there's a huge gap of products in there that don't need 30 watts, but they need a little bit more than 15.4. So by doing this intelligent PoE management, where we look at the power draw that the device is pulling, including on boot up, and then only allocate the enough power that that device needs. So it frees up and allows you to put a lot more devices on the same switch with the same PoE budget. So we'll give you a couple of, theoretical examples here. So the first one is a fancy IP phone. It's PoE powered. It is a class 3 device. So it, using the standard, will have your switch reserve 15.4 watts of power for every phone that you plug into that switch. However, in reality, it's only pulling 9 watts of power. So in our consumption mode, we would only allocate 9 watts of power per device plugged in. So that means that if you're using the standard way of doing things, you would need a switch with 370 watts of power to support 24 IP phones. Where with our consumption mode, you only need a switch with a PoE budget of 216 watts to power up all 24 IP phones. So we'll do one more example here. A pan tilt zoom IP security camera. So this is a class 4 device. So it will require 30 watts of power from your switch for each camera you plug in. However, our consumption mode will see that this thing only actually needs around 16 watts of power. So it'll only allocate 16 watts of power per camera. So that means to power up 20 of these cameras using the standard method of doing it, you would need 600 watts of PoE budget on your switch. Whereas using our consumption mode or intelligent mode, you would only need 320 watts of power on that switch to be able to power up 20 of these pan-tilt zoom cameras. So moving on from PoE, I want a few slides here to talk about our security switches. So these are our 1350 series switches. And the reason I'm breaking them out into their own slides is they've got some interesting features that you may not normally be expecting to see on a switch. So these are a series of switches that were custom built specifically for those of you that are doing IP camera deployments, those of you doing, security cameras. Although some of these features may be handy even in non-security applications. So we'll go through them here really quick. So one of the first cool things is it can provide data and power up to 250 meters, right? So the industry standard, the normal way most switches work is they only give you a 100-meter cable run before you either can't provide power, data, or both. So with these 1350 series switches, we can provide both data and power up to 250 meters. And this should be compatible with any PoE device. It doesn't require you buy something special or put on a special adapter. It'll just work. Now, the trade-off with this 250 meter mode, though, is it drops your data rate. So data rate is only 10 megabits per second, but as long as your camera or your users don't need more than 10 megabits per second throughput, this is a nice trade-off there to get you that extra run. So you don't have to put, extra switches or extenders on your network to get these longer runs. Another nice feature on these switches is continuous PoE power. So if for some reason the switch needs to reboot, whether it's because you're applying a firmware update or a configuration change or what have you, it will continue to provide PoE power to the connected devices so those connected devices don't reboot. So as soon as the switch comes back online, those devices are back online. You don't have to wait for the switch to boot up and then for those devices to boot up like you would with most of our other switches. We have a quote unquote camera status screen, which is able to show what's basically plugged into each of the different ports and provide some intelligent information on them, including which IP address that device has. And we have an automatic quote unquote camera recovery mode. So this is kind of cool. And again, it's designed for cameras, but it will work with your other networking equipment. Basically, you can set the switch to automatically reboot devices that become non-responsive. So we have two ways of doing that. For cameras, we have LLDP. For non-camera devices, we can use ping. So you can configure here how often do you want to ping this device that's connected to it, and then how many times does that ping need to fail in a row to trigger a reboot, where the switch will then say, hey, wait a minute, this thing's now been non-responsive for 3 pings. I can power cycle it now to help it reboot itself. And then there's some additional settings over here. So you can tell it, how long after power cycling the device to wait before resuming the ping checks again, because obviously different devices may take longer to boot up and become responsive again. So it's a cool little feature there for you. And then they're just built a little bit more heavy duty for protection from surges and things like that. So that is it for our switches. Now we'll talk a little bit about our wireless products. And I'm not going to go into the individual APs for the most part here. Just like we did with our switches, we've got sort of like 3 categories of products. So we've got what's being called simplicity, flexibility, and ultimate. So simplicity is really our Soho series products. That's the NWA 50 and 90 series products. For business class customers, most of you will be looking at our flexibility or our ultimate series of switches. So the flexibility series is our NWA series switches that start with the numbers 1 or 2. So NWA 1123 AC, NWA 220 AX, etc. And then our ultimate series are those that start with WAC or WAX. So I do have one slide where we're showing some of the differences on the individual access points. And I wanted to put this in today's presentation because this is an area where we get a lot of questions. You will notice here the NWA 50, 55, 90, NWA 110. These are all AX 1800 series products, all with very different price points. So it causes some confusion to say, well, what's the difference? Why would I go with one or the other? So the NWA 50 is, for the most part, an Amazon exclusive. And then all the other models here are available through distribution. So the 50 is sort of, like I said, it's a sort of a Soho class device. It is Wi-Fi 6, but it doesn't have all of the Wi-Fi 6 features that our higher end access points have. And it can be Nebula managed, but it's missing a lot of the Nebula features. So for instance, it doesn't support WPA2 Enterprise or WPA3 Enterprise. It doesn't support captive portal. It doesn't support load balancing, etc. So for most of you, it's probably not something that you would want to use in a business class environment. It comes with a 2-year warranty. The NWA 55 AXE is the outdoor version of the NWA 50 AX. It gives you a little bit temperature and weather hardened enclosure, gives you external antennas. So I do recommend this if you're looking for a cheap, easy way to provide a simple bridge. So it does support point-to-point bridging or point-to-multipoint bridging through Nebula. So you can set this up to connect different buildings together and create those links between buildings where you don't want to or don't have the ability to run fiber or Cat6 between those buildings. So it's a very affordable, easy way to do point-to-point outdoor links. It can also provide normal AP services, but again, it's missing a lot of those business class features that you would probably want if you were using it in a business environment. And then the step up from that is the NWA 90AX. So what it does is it's still a Wi-Fi 6 Lite device. So it supports Wi-Fi 6, but it's missing some of those features. But it does unlock more of the Nebula type or the business class features. It does support captive portal. It does support WPA2 and 3 enterprise encryption, but it still doesn't do load balancing. It doesn't support CNP, and it's got a 2-year warranty on it. And then basically everything above that, so everything that's part of those other 2 series that we talked about, the flexibility and the ultimate, those all come with lifetime warranties. If they're Wi-Fi 6 devices, they support the full Wi-Fi 6 feature set, and they support generally the full Nebula feature set. They also support some of the extra features like our CNP and CNP Plus AP hosted security services. So when we're looking at our business class AP, so anything that's NWA 100 and higher or WAC, WAX series, those come with lifetime warranties. And part of the reason why they can come with a lifetime warranty is because of how we build them. If you've been to one of our older trade shows, you've been around a bit, you may have seen us demonstrate this where we will have our APs, we'll have a Ubiquiti AP, we'll have a Ruckus AP, maybe we'll have a Cisco AP. And if you hold them, you will see that ours, all comparable models as far as performance goes, ours weighs a lot more. And that has to do with how we design things here. So when you're dealing with a solid state appliance like an access point, there's 2 main causes of failure. The first one is heat fatigue. The second one is capacitor failure. So to solve capacitor failure issues, we do not use any electrolytic capacitors. We only use solid state capacitors from reliable capacitor suppliers. And then for the heat fatigue, which is probably your number one cause of failure, we've put in a lot more extra shielding in there than you would normally get with most of our competitors. So one of the things you will see is there is a large metal plate directly behind the motherboard here on the access point. So that's designed to pull the heat off the chips and off the solder joints into this plate. And then you'll see we've got tons of heat vents in the back. So the heat can then radiate out of the access point. If you look at some of our competition, not only do they not have a big heat sink like this, they don't even have vent holes in their enclosures. So that's why, we're giving you a lifetime even on a $100 access point, whereas or $120 access point where our competition's only giving you 1 or 2 years. It's because of how it's designed to help survive it. The other thing you will notice on most of our APs is that there's a lot more shielding around the chips on the motherboard. And that's because we're not just shielding for EMI, which is what most of our competition is doing. We also provide extra shielding to help deal with 4G and 5G interference. So a lot of people don't realize this, but 4G and 5G can use frequencies that border the normal Wi-Fi channels. And it's normally not an issue like in a traditional home type environment. But if you're in a larger building where they're using a DAS system to bring cellular coverage into the building and then redistribute it in the building, if those DAS remote units are too close to your access point, it can cause interference and degrade performance when those are using neighboring channels. So that extra shielding helps isolate and protect you from that. And then another thing we do that's a little bit different is we don't put the antennas directly on the PCBA. Even our more expensive competition tends to do this. Instead, we use a second board separate from the main motherboard, and we'll generally have a RF shield behind it to create better isolation. So those antennas are isolated and not cramped down here on the board where they may have some signal distortion and issues caused by the shielding and other stuff that's going on that board. So now I want to talk about some of the technology we have that you will not see at our competition generally, that maybe you aren't familiar with. So when you're looking at our access points, you will notice a lot of them end with the letters D-I or just D. So that's telling you that those models of access point have a dual optimized antenna system. So traditionally what your general access point is and what most of our competition offers is you've got one set of antennas that are optimized based on the idea that you're mounting your access point on the ceiling directly over the area that needs to be covered. So the signal radiates out as like a big round wave or an umbrella shape. The problem is you don't always get to mount your access points directly over the area where they want to provide coverage. Oftentimes you end up having to stick access points on the wall. So when you do that, you're basically rotating that coverage pattern 90 degrees, and it's no longer optimal. You're now sending a lot of signal up into the floor, down into the floor, up into the ceiling. You can cause interference if you're in a multi-story building, etc. So our solution to that is this dual optimized antenna technology. Basically, we've got two different sets of antennas built into these access points. One that's optimized for ceiling mount, one that's optimized for wall mount. So you can choose on a per AP basis which configuration to use based on where you have mounted that access point. Another technology we have here is smart antenna. So again, if you're looking at the model names of our access points, if it ends in the letter S, that's telling you that this access point supports our smart antenna technology. This would be similar. Really, the only other guys that have this is Ruckus with their BeamFlex. So very similar technology to Ruckus's BeamFlex or BeamFlex Plus. So if you're familiar with that, you're familiar with our smart antenna for the most part. But for those of you that aren't, we'll just explain it real quick. Again, antennas generally have one fixed antenna pattern that covers an area. Now, one of the challenges we often run into out there is what's called co-channel interference. Basically, every device operating on a specific frequency has to take turns broadcasting. If they both broadcast at the same time, they interfere with each other, you get dropped packets and degraded performance. So that can be other Wi-Fi devices, other wireless devices like Bluetooth, or non-Wi-Fi based IP cameras, things like that, remote control cars. But it can also be things like microwaves and other industrial equipment which put out radiation, that can cause interference and degrade your network. So our smart antenna technology has been designed to sort of solve that for you. Does two things. We'll just show a little example here, get caught up. So basically with smart antenna technology, instead of having that one fixed antenna pattern, or like our dual optimized having two antenna patterns, we have hundreds of antenna patterns. And the access point is able to choose the optimal antenna pattern for each client that it is talking to. So it's able to take into account where that client device is compared to the access point and choose the antenna pattern that focuses the signal to that client, improving that signal's connection quality and the signal to noise ratio. The other cool thing our algorithm that we use does is it takes into account other sources of interference on that same channel, and will try to choose an antenna pattern that not only optimizes based on where the client device is, but also optimize based on where those other sources of noise are for, to help try to avoid and ignore what would otherwise be interference on the network. So it makes a huge difference in crowded environments. So here's a quick example here. This is comparing our WAX 650S with the HP Aruba 515. Both of these are Wi-Fi 6 access points supporting 4 spatial streams on the 5 gigahertz radio. So you can see here we did a series of tests at different locations. We are in green, HP is in blue, and you can see the smart antenna makes a huge difference here as far as the performance, both when it comes to transmit speeds as well as receive speeds. So there is third-party independent evaluation that's been done that supports what I've just been telling you about the benefits of smart technology. So a number of years back, the University of Brescia in Italy, their networking group decided to test the claims made by us and Ruckus about smart antenna technology. They bought us, Ruckus, Cisco, which doesn't have smart antenna, and HP Aruba, which doesn't have smart antenna, put them through their paces. If you go out on Google and just type in like a Zycel smart antenna white paper, we have a nice white paper you can print out or share with your customers that explains the key takeaways from that. You can also just go to this link here. This is taking you to the actual university webpage where they fully document all of the tests they did, how they did them, all of the results, etc. If you really want to get down to the nitty gritty. But some of the key takeaways here is in co-channel interference prone environments, which is any environment where you've got lots of users or lots of access points, up to 70% better performance versus non-smart antenna access points. Specifically 56% better performance compared to Cisco, and even up to 45% better performance in some scenarios versus the other smart antenna vendor they were testing. And then lastly here, I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that we do offer an on-premise controller. So for those of you that for whatever your reasons may be, or whatever your customers' reasons may be, don't want to use Nebula for management, we do have our on-premise controller. And for the most part, the feature set's very similar between what's in Nebula and what's on the on-premise controller. Both do intelligent dynamic channel selection. Both of them don't require you to set up the individual AP or tell it it's going to be managed by the cloud or managed by a controller. So basically, if you have an access point and you enable the controller, our Zycel access points will see the controller and automatically talk to the controller, similar to how we will check with the cloud to see if they're registered currently in the cloud or not. Supports mesh mode, supports all the fast roaming standards out there. The one feature here that's really different between the local controllers and the Nebula Cloud is the ability to do rogue AP detection. Currently, that is only something that we do using the local controller. We don't do that with the cloud. Dynamic VLANs, AP load balancing, etc. So, and then just in general, that works with our USG Flex series, our ATP series, and even our older VPN series. For the most part, most of these devices will be able to manage up to 8 APs out of the box. And then you can buy licenses to unlock additional APs if you need to manage more than that. So you can see here, just for reference, a USG Flex 100 can manage up to 24 APs. A USG Flex 500 can manage up to 72 APs. ATP 800 can manage up to 520 APs. And with that, guys, we are done with today's webinar. So if you have any questions, again, send them in using that question and answer interface. While I wait to see if any questions come in, just real quick, most of our webinars are recorded and then uploaded to our YouTube channel. So again, because Zycel is a global company, there's a lot of different Zycel YouTube channels. The one for North America is Zycel America channel. In addition to webinars, we have some best practices videos, we have video case studies, etc. So go check that out when you have time. If you'd like to connect with us, we're on LinkedIn as Zycel US channel. And then lastly, just highlight for you here, we do have user forums. Simply go to forum.zycel.com. Unlike other user forums, these are monitored by our PM and support teams, and they will often weigh in and answer questions. They also use the feedback you guys provide there to help prioritize which features are coming next, where we have room for improvement, etc. It's also probably the best resource for quickly finding security bulletins, release notes, things like that, etc. Okay, I've got no questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. I hope to see you on one of our future webinars.